It's a land use plan that.
We're good.
Wasn't allowed this year.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the NPDES committee. So we're hot and ready to go with this. So the first thing we have to do, obviously, is the call to order and the notice. I was told at one time that we don't have to read this, just have to ask. But that it protects me if I actually read it, so I'll do that myself. North Carolina General Statute 138A15 mandates that at the beginning of any meeting of a board, the chair shall remind all members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest under this subchapter. Chair also shall inquire as to whether there is any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board at this time. And I will ask each of the members here to, is there a conflict? Do you have a conflict? Or is there a perception of a conflict? Well, hearing none, I'll say that we're good. I'd like to welcome you too. We have two new members. Yeah, I don't believe either one of you here before. We haven't had a meeting since last July. So that was probably it. Do you know about NPDES and why you're here? That's what I was afraid of. Well, see, that may be the rest of us that are here too. We had a lot of informational items in the past meetings is what it's been. And how long has it been, Richard, since really the department took this on? All these permits don't have to come back to the EMC as per se.
In 2007.
Now that's 2007. And now the reason for that is obvious. Would we want to have to review every single one of these permits? There would be incredibly amount of time. On the other side of it, you will be out in the community and you will be working with folks that may have one of these permits. They are involved with a lot of different things. They may actually ask you as a commission member, so what about this? What about that? Why am I subject to this? How can I make an improvement? So JD, as chair of the EMC, asked me to be a chairman on this. And the main reason for it is almost always informational things that we've done so far. What is each group has done. But the main reason for it was if you do get asked, it is still our responsibility. If you read the rules, you read the legislation, we're still totally responsible for this. But we've given the delegation back to the staff because they're the ones, the experts. So there's no reason to argue with it. But on the other side of it, we need to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. And JD, do you have any other comments of that in that relative note?
Well, I'll give the long technical you gave. I can't top what you just did, but I think.
Well, that's because I didn't say much.
I think more at a higher level, the Clean Water Act asks that we have the ability to hear variances on NPDES permits. And one of the first rules of this committee was to look at those variances. Our state legislation does give the EMC the statutory authority, as Bill said, to do permits. And we have since delegated over that responsibility. Part of that is in the Clean Water Act that EPA, because it's really not a delegated program, it's the authority to operate the program. So they want somebody in DEQ's the enforcement agency that they can call 24/7 if there's a problem and a fish gets killed or some turns up in the water, that something can be done. They don't want to wait for us or the General Assembly to meet every other month or whenever to take action. I'm oversimplifying. But so the department has a lot of the implementation side of this thing. But we still have, and in our MOA with the EPA, it's jointly mentioned that it is our statutory responsibility, and the state is defined as the EMC and the department. So we have the requirements to do it. And so some of the things we were looking at last year as we went through this was, and people hate when I say it, but we just can't take a statutory requirement and throw it over the wall and never check on it and never hear about it, in my opinion. And so a lot of this was, how do we stay informed? How do we be helpful? How do we help the department? How do we help the regulated community? Because we are seeing more and more of these NPDES permit issues being fought out in the courts and going directly to the General Assembly. And sometimes Bill says people on the street, but the General Assembly will call you and say, what the world's going on? This is what your requirements are. Why don't you know anything about it? And so part of this is that mission of how do we stay informed? And I think that's the presentations today. Part of what came out is the number of permits, the process people go through, the public hearing process on permits. The department wanted to do these two presentations today just to help educate us on what some of the permitting processes were that were going on. So we stay better informed, and we should do that from time to time. So that's really what today is about, I believe. So questions for existing or new members? I mean, that was my really longer explanation than Bill gave, but.
Any questions? Basically, we're still responsible is what you're saying. So, but the main thing is to have the information in front of us. We do have a quorum, and that's a good thing. We do have minutes. There's one thing that we need to make an amendment on those minutes. Is it had JD as a member in that minute, so we need to remove that. So I'm gonna make that as a motion to strike JD from that as a member of this committee. I would like to have a motion to accept the minutes as adopted or as approved.
Mr. Chair, could I get clarity on one part of the minutes, please? Director Richard Rogers stated there has been a Region 4 meeting in the last, there has not been a Region 4 meeting in the last 6 months, but there was one being scheduled for later in 2025. Is that a correct
That's the way I remember
statement in that minute?
In July, yes, but we ended up not having a meeting in 2025. We actually just had a Regional 4 meeting last week with the water quality directors in Atlanta with the Region 4 states.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want clarity.
Any other questions about the minutes?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
With the correction that.
With the
Chair Solomon
correction.
Be removed.
Yes.
Yes.
We have a second on that. Well, you about have to.
I'll second that.
They weren't here, so if you can't do it, then we'll go back to next month. I guess.
I second that.
All right, well,
Mr. Chair.
You can still vote.
you can still vote, but I don't think you could approve minutes that you weren't here. That would be very unpractical. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as read with that amendment. Information items, municipal NPDES permitting unit updates.
Good morning, almost afternoon. Thank you all for letting us give these information items to you today. Since the committee hadn't met in a while, we were asked to give a little bit of an introduction about who we are. You're going to hear from two supervisors today. My name's Karen Preston. I'm the municipal unit supervisor. So that means I have municipal NPDES permits, pre-treatment, speculative limits for those systems, and also collection system permitting under me. So today you're going to hear a little bit about our municipal unit backlog, and then as well a pre-treatment overview, as that's been kind of a hot topic in other committees and the EMC lately. Prior to joining DEQ in 2024, I actually worked for local municipalities as a pre-treatment coordinator, as a lab coordinator, and as an operator at a municipal wastewater treatment plant. So a little bit of my background coming into DEQ. Our municipal permit backlog is based on these numbers here. We have 164 total major municipal permits. Majors are anything that discharge over 1 MGD. And then for minor municipals, which are less than 1 MGD, we have 122 permits. So our backlog numbers right now are 25 permits, or 15.24% for our majors. Or for our minors, we have 30 permits, and that's 24.59%. Our goal with EPA is to keep our backlog at 15% by September September 2026 is to have our backlog down to 15%. So we've been relatively stable at that 15.24 in the last few years of getting the backlog down quite a bit. Several of those permits are on permanent hold for contentious reasons, so they haven't been able to come off yet, but we're working towards it, obviously. We are also in the process of posting and hiring 2 full-time employees for the municipal permitting unit. These are not new positions. We're just filling open positions that have been open for a little while. And these positions will be focused on both sewer system permitting and NPDES permitting. So they will be helping us get this backlog down further. For pretreatment, this is going to be a little bit more involved explanation. And I'm going to talk about it like I talk about it when I explain it to industries. We call ourselves like a puzzle because we all have a piece, we all have a part to play in pretreatment, and none of them can operate in a silo. So the first portion of the puzzle is the federal government, the EPA, and the Clean Water Act, which was talked about a little bit earlier, but in the Clean Water Act, it delegates the authority to the states to implement the NPDES program. And through the NPDES program is where pretreatment is required and implemented. So at the state, which is NC, DEQ, DWR, in North Carolina, the delegated authority to implement the NPDES program is given to us by the EPA, and then the pretreatment program is a requirement of the POTW's NPDES permit. So if you read the standard conditions of any of our NPDES permits, they have the requirement to implement a pretreatment program following certain criteria, if they fall into certain criteria. In North Carolina, we DWR are considered the approval authority. This means we review all program elements for adequacy and or approval for those local pretreatment programs. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in the next slide. The third piece of the puzzle is the local municipality or the POTW that holds an NPDES permit and is required to have a pretreatment program. In North Carolina, they are called the control authority because they control the SIUs that discharge to their treatment plant. Only publicly owned treatment works will operate an approved pretreatment program. That means that no private wastewater systems would have a pretreatment program or an approved one through us. And they are required to have a pretreatment program that is approved by the state if they accept processed wastewater from a significant industrial user. And so then the last piece of the puzzle is significant industrial users or SIUs. They are what is called an indirect discharger of industrial waste that is conveyed to a municipal wastewater treatment plant. So in some other rulemaking, we've talked about direct dischargers. Those are industries that have their own NPDES. These are industrial users that discharge to the municipality. So their permit is handled by the municipality. It is not issued from DEQ.
So can I give you, see if you agree?
Sure.
I think one of the things that people don't realize is those industrial pretreatment programs knock the heavy stuff down to basically domestic strength. And they go into the municipal POTW. And then the municipal POTW is responsible for taking everything they collect domestically or from these pretreatment programs and putting it in the river. Okay. So if the pretreatment program has a violation, it is a violation for the local government or for the POTW. They don't walk away from it. So if you go to the city of Raleigh and they don't maintain their pretreatment program, they let somebody go rogue in the pretreatment program, the city of Raleigh will get an NOV, not just the pretreatment program. And that's a very important distinction because now you're making that control authority, that local POTW, really run herd on all of those industrial users that are having something above domestic strength. And I'm paraphrasing, but just to keep it, they have to do that, not the state, not the SIU. It comes back through that municipality. So when we talk about the municipalities being our partners, we've quite literally given them the ability to enforce against the industrials on a day-to-day basis. So that's why it's so important. You hear that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because it is a condition of their NPDES permit, the violations that they would receive would actually be against their permit, and that they were not following that. So that's how we are able to enforce against the municipality as a whole. And it is a little bit separate from like a limit violation and a pretreatment violation. We handle them a little differently, but we still do hold them accountable. So as the approval authority, like I said, DEQ reviews and approves pretreatment program elements submitted by the control authorities. And this is a list of them. I'm going to go fairly quickly. It's a lot of information, but a headworks analysis is a technical evaluation of the loading capacity at a wastewater treatment plant. So for instance, they can do, it's a series of spreadsheets that they put real data in that they've collected over a 5-year period to tell them how much phosphorus are you removing? How much phosphorus can your treatment plant handle and still meet either a water quality standard or your NPDES limit? And all of that information is put into these calculations for every pollutant of concern, just phosphorus as an example. And they can tell how much loading they have available to grow through that for just their municipality as a whole. And then they also have a separate calculation that tells how much they can allocate out to industries. So this allows them, when an industry comes in to apply for a permit, to say, we have X number of pounds of phosphorus available and you need this much. Well, that's over our allocation, so you need to put in a pretreatment system or you have to go somewhere else. So that enables them to have those educated conversations. We also review their long-term monitoring plan, which is an outline of everything they sample for, where to sample, how often. It includes each part of the wastewater treatment plant that they must sample, so all of the different stages of treatment, and where and how much they sample at their SIUs. All of that data is what is used in the headworks analysis calculations. The next part is the industrial user permits. Those are the permits that are issued by the pretreatment program. They set limits to protect the collection system, the treatment plant, and the receiving stream. In pretreatment, we have federal categorical guidelines that may be used if the facility is a categorical facility. And they also can have local limits to protect their treatment plant. That's why they do so much site-specific sampling. The next portion is an industrial waste survey. This is just a survey of all of the possible industrial facilities in the area. This is a condition that we can enforce upon if they don't do, requiring them to permit everybody that is required to have a permit. So it makes them go out and survey all of the industries in the area. Their enforcement response plan outlines and is outlined and expected responses to noncompliance and the associated enforcement actions the control authority will enact. So if an SIU has a limit violation, what is expected? Will there be a fine? Do they have to resample within a certain amount of days? And all of that is outlined step by step, going through even escalated enforcement actions, all the way up to the top where sometimes we have to get them to cut people's water off because they won't stop violating their permit. So it's all laid out there. And then the last thing is the sewer use ordinance. This is an ordinance adopted by the POTW's governing board, and it is what actually gives them the authority to implement their pretreatment program and control over their users in the sewer system. We do not approve sewer use ordinances. We will just read them and concur with them because we are not lawyers. So we hope that they have lawyers to review them. Everything else on this list, we do review and supply approval letters for. So what does that look like for us as a program? We have 121 active pretreatment programs, and that covers 629 industrial dischargers. We started 2025 with a backlog of headworks analysis with 59 on the backlog. There was not a lot of staff in pretreatment for a while. We are fully staffed now, which is very exciting. In 2025, initial reviews of 50 were completed, leaving only 9 on the backlog currently, and we actually issued approvals for 33 of the 59. We're just waiting for more information on the other ones. And this did not include the ones that were being submitted and reviewed as the year went on to not add to that backlog. So we definitely reviewed more than 50 of them last year. The industrial user backlog, we sent 168 reviews and approvals last year and completely eliminated our backlog. We have no industrial user permits waiting right now for review. Long-term monitoring plans, we started 2025 with 30 on the backlog, and we currently only have 6 that are unreviewed. And then A comment came up about pretreatment program and audits and inspections, so we wanted to make sure we included this in here. They're handled on a 5-year rolling schedule, at least one audit per those 5 years. And inspections may be every year or at least 3 out of the 5 years they must be inspected. The department, along with the regional offices, covers about 75 to 100 per calendar year. And in our 106 work plan with EPA, we do have to do 40% inspections and 20% audits of all of the programs in a rolling calendar year. So that's how we work that out. 75 to 100 allows us to meet that. And we have, in the past, not that I've seen, not met that goal yet. I think that's all I wanted to share. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was a quick rundown of pretreatment, but anything I can clarify?
Any questions?
You mentioned private wastewater treatment plants.
Yes.
Are there many of those or?
There can be for like private developments, neighborhoods, things like that. We do have some privately owned treatment plants.
And they are or are not required to have NPDES permits?
They would have an NPDES permit, just no pretreatment. They typically wouldn't accept industrial waste.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I do have a comment though, and I appreciate it. Last week when we were reviewing some of this, I asked if you could make sure to put acronyms and what they are. And you know, if you noticed that usually they put up, here's all the acronyms, and then they go to the next slide. Well, I really appreciate that you put this here.
Yes, sir.
It's really helpful. It's acronyms in government is more than fish in the sea. So that's just, so thank you for doing that.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, that was.
Thank you.
May not help anybody else, but it sure helps me. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon officially. And my name is Caroline Robinson. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am the Compliance and Expedited Permitting Unit Supervisor in the NPDES permitting unit. A little bit of my background, I started in environmental consulting, doing a lot of groundwater sampling, soil sampling, and now I'm on the permit writing side of things. So I've been with the department for about 2 years now. I started as an environmental specialist too, writing permits on the team, and then I took the supervisor role. So a little bit of experience on both sides. I'm going to give some compliance and expedited permitting unit updates today. The compliance and expedited permitting unit is one of the 3 units. So we've got industrial, municipal, which Karen's the supervisor of, and then our unit. And we do all of the minor NPDES permits, so minor wastewater treatment plants, all the water treatment plant permits. And then we also have general permits, and we also do all of the compliance. So today I'm going to be talking about our general NPDES wastewater permits. We have 8 general permits, and general permits are different from an individual permit because they're issued for a given statewide activity. Individual permits are more specific to each individual facility. Permit applications and engineering alternatives analysis must be submitted to obtain a certificate of coverage under a general permit. And these general permits are renewed every 5 years by the central office. A certificate of coverage is a formal document issued to a specific project or facility confirming it is approved to operate under an existing general NPDES wastewater permit. There are many benefits of receiving coverage of a certificate of coverage under a general permit. Cost is one. It's cheaper to apply for coverage under the general permit than an individual permit. It takes a lot less time. Every general permit is public notice, and then the certificates of coverage are not. So that takes less time. And so it's quicker for us to renew. Those permits are usually a couple pages rather than a longer individual permit. And most NPDES wastewater COCs or certificates of coverage are eligible for automatic renewals as long as the permittee is up to date on their annual fees. There are 2 general permits that are not eligible for automatic renewals, and that's the NCG 59 and the 60, and I'll get into those. These are all of our general permits and what they cover. So the NCG 50 is for non-contact cooling water, boiler blowdown, cooling tower, condensate, and hydroelectric dams. The NCG 51 covers groundwater remediation for petroleum and chlorinated solvent contaminated sites. The NCG 52 covers sand dredging activities. NCG 55 is our single family residence general permit. NCG 56 is our pesticides permit. NCG 58 is our reuse from conjunctive use and reclaimed water systems discharge permit. NCG 59 is for water treatment plant dischargers, only for backwash wastewater from green sand and conventional systems. And our NCG 60 permit is for seafood packing and rinsing and aquatic animal operations. As you can see, we renewed 5 of these general permits this past year, so they don't expire till 2030. And we have 1 up for renewal this year at the end of November, and that is our pesticides permit. So we're currently working on that. And like I mentioned before, the NCG 59 and the 60 are both 2 of the only general permits that we require a renewal application for. And that's to make sure that those permittees shouldn't be covered under a different effluent table in the general permit. So the NCG 59 is all the effluent tables are divided by flow limit. And so we want to check those facilities and make sure that they shouldn't belong or be looking at a different effluent table. And the NCG 60 has to do with production levels. So we want to make sure that those facilities are also referencing the correct effluent table. Another thing I wanted to mention, you'll see that the NCG 53 is not up here. That was discontinued at the end of October 2025, and all permittees were required to apply for coverage under the NCG 60 at that time. So far, as of right now, 51 out of the 74 permittees have transferred over from the 53 to the 60. There are several facilities that no longer need coverage because they're no longer operating. And I think there's about 8 that we've received no response from. So most people have switched over. This is our breakdown of active COCs that we have for each general permit. Our most popular one is obviously the NCG 55, the single family residences permit. And our other very popular one is the NCG 50, which is non-contact cooling water. All right, so now I'm going to talk about special orders by consent, or as we call them, SOCs. A special order by consent is an administrative order between NCDEQ delegated by the EMC, and we enter into an agreement with an entity responsible for causing or contributing to water pollution evidenced by noncompliance. Any facility operating under an SOC is under a statutory moratorium, so they can't expand their flow during being on an SOC. Failure of the entity to comply with the terms and conditions of the SOC can lead to payment and stipulated penalties. There are several benefits of a permittee getting into one of these agreements. There are scheduled steps of activities to regain permit compliance, so it kind of creates a roadmap for the permittee to get back into compliance. And limits for particular parameters under their NPDES permit may be relaxed, especially during times of construction. If they're doing a big overhaul of their site, they will relax those permits for the period of time they're on the SOC to get back into compliance eventually with their permit. And there's a potential for a remittance of fines and penalties if all scheduled activities are met. So to obtain an SOC, these are the steps that a permittee would take. There's a pre-application meeting with the regional office and the central office to get everyone on the same page, and then they would submit an SOC application. The central office and the regional office would work together to draft the SOC, and then both parties for the SOC would review and provide comments to get on the same page with the agreement, and then it would be sent to public notice and eventually issued. Here's a breakdown of all of the special orders by consent in the state based on regional office. So the Asheville region currently has 3 active SOCs. The Fayetteville office has 2 active SOCs. The Winston-Salem office has 1 active SOC. The Raleigh office has 2 active SOCs. Mooresville regional office has 2 SOCs. And the Washington region has 6 current active SOCs. So there's total 16 SOCs going on in the state right now, and there's 5 pending SOC applications, and many of those are amendments to current SOCs to extend them or change dates. And I think that's all I had. Are there any questions?
Any questions? A lot of information there, very
Yeah.
quick, very quick.
One question, when you say single-family residence, is that a housing development or?
It's usually just a single house, like just one standing house on a street, or like a cul-de-sac. And it's usually, like we have several in Asheville, kind of out where they can't connect to the sewer system and they discharge to a nearby body of water.
So they're not on septic?
They're on septic, but they have a treatment system, and then that treatment system discharges to a body of water.
So they have an advanced treatment system, not just a leach field, okay.
Exactly, yep, yeah. They don't have enough land or the right kind of land for that, yeah.
Can you walk me a little bit through the review process?
For a general permit? Yeah. Yes, so we look at the application. The first thing we do is they will submit an engineering alternatives analysis with their application. And that will show us their different options for discharge. So can they connect to a wastewater treatment plant is one thing we always ask. Can you have a leach field? Can you use reclaimed water? There's several different options in that alternatives analysis, and we present that to an EAA committee within our unit, and it will either pass and then we continue on to draft that COC, or if it fails, we'll go back to the permittee and ask for more information.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Let's-
What are we looking for?
What's he doing?
I must have missed that.
Got a hidden mic on him or something. What did he do?
No, this are very important, and this is the reason we want you to understand some of these things. You're going to get asked these questions. Most of the time we're out in the public, we'll get asked this. For instance, I was in agriculture, they went through the trout general permit. That was very contentious in places, so it was something to have to deal with. So you may be in that same position, maybe on somebody's house that you just asked that question about. Not likely, but it's good to know that you are here, what your responsibility are, and that it is an impact.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so since you brought up the trout operations, have we resolved that general permit issue there? They're being permitted, they're operating, we're at some state of compliance there or whatever?
Yes, so the 53 was discontinued, and we moved to the NCG 60, and we asked everybody to transfer coverage and apply for the 60. That deadline was October 31st of 2025 that they could switch over. And we sent many notification letters out, called, and tried to get everybody's attention about it to get everybody moved over. But I think it's been a success. And now the 60 is active. So we're done with the 53.
And they have to make annual application, they have to make an annual application, is that right?
Yes, yeah, they'll have to submit a renewal application every 5 years.
So, yeah, so let me, maybe, and Richard may, for everybody on the committee, this went through the General Assembly twice, I believe, but, basically that general permit got to looking like an individual permit. Had a lot more testing requirements, and a lot more frequencies. The same thing kind of happened in a different way on the ag permit you'll hear about tomorrow. A little bit from Ellie, some general conditions got added. And the problem, the great thing about general permits is most of the population uses general permits, not individual permits. So that's great. It's quick, it's easy, should be kind of de minimis. Some of the problems is when we get to overregulate them sometimes and make them look like general permits or start doing things statewide that should only be doing for local conditions. Probably shouldn't even be in a general permit. That's debatable. But the trout stream did get resolved, and I think through negotiation and a lot of meetings over a course of a couple of years, what happened was some of the frequencies got reduced and some of the testing parameters got reduced to a point where the ag community or the trout farmers, which are all mostly part-time people, we're not like, Oregon or Washington State where we got full-time. These are people that are out working during the day and have little trout farms on the side or something. So for the most part, so it got to be a little bit more responsive for them, and they could live with it. So I think it's straight, but the issue with general permits is still one that this committee should be aware of. I mean, we're not talking about stormwater either, but there's a lot of issues with stormwater and those kind of things, home building permits and stuff that really do fall under permitting, but they're under general permits, not individual permits. So need to watch individual, we need to watch general permits too.
Just one follow-up question for her, please. You indicated 59 and 60 was an annual application, but the new seafood ones that we're doing for trout operations are every 5 years. Is that right?
Every general permit gets renewed every 5 years. But for the 59, for the waste, for that's water treatment plants, and for the 60 for fisheries and things, that's they submit a renewal application every 5 years. Everybody else is automatically renewed when the general permit is renewed.
Okay.
But we have those two groups send in an application to make sure that they're referencing the correct effluent table in the permit with their current flow and their current production.
So it's the position of the department, the current permit they're under is adequate. We don't see changing that in the next 5 years?
Just,
Just trying to.
I think JD summarized it very well. One thing that did happen and we found out is that rather than revising the current permit, we had to issue a new permit for the agriculture rather than sticking with the 53, right? We issued a completely new permit, which kind of cleared the slate so that we could go back at it. It was preferred by EPA. So that's the process we used. And it was an agreed upon between the department, between the fisheries, as well as, and their representatives, as well as the EPA.
Sound like collaboration.
Sounds like it.
It was sharp collaboration, but it was
Yeah,
lengthy and sharp collaboration, but it was collaboration.
It worked out, so nobody got exactly what they wanted, right? But it's something that can be managed, and I think it really helped us refocus our interest in all those folks that were in operation for these facilities.
Gotcha. I was part of some of the early days of that, so.
Yeah, I was too, but I won't comment.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
I think too, a lot of things that we've done to help make the general permits more understandable is we've included with our COCs that we send out to permittees, we've included a supplement page that tells the permittee exactly which effluent table they're looking at for each facility. So I think that's helped clear up any confusion too.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just ask the judge, and he's fresh off being an ALJ judge and he's our executive director. We'll introduce him tomorrow, but John, you got anything to say on the general and individual permit thing or anything you want to say now?
Yeah, the only thing I would ask, the question I would have for staff
He
maybe.
needs to be in the mic. We're gonna get it in the minutes.
Yeah, come up here.
Get him a mic over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only question I have for staff, and that is, what impact, if any, does the Farm Bureau decision have on the development of general permit and the inclusion of new conditions in a general permit? Have you thought about that? And I saw a timeline for issuing those permits. The pesticides is coming up. Is there any impact, do you think, from the Farm Bureau decision?
The way we're addressing the Farm Bureau decision is with the CAFO permit specifically. We're in the process of developing rules that we'll be bringing to the commission in July. So that's the way we're looking at that right now. Commission will have a chance to look at that interpretation of their decision and how we're moving forward there. So.
Does everybody understand what John was saying about the Farm Bureau? You may need to explain that a little bit because it made it sound like it's fucking Farm Bureau come in here and tell us what to do anytime. No, there's three things they had in those exceptions. I guess that's what you're trying to say.
That's correct, Commissioner. And I happen to be at the Office of Administrative Hearings. I think I came after the initial decision left the Office of Administrative Hearings and then was appealed up. But it was a Supreme Court decision, and it basically held that if you're going to include conditions in a general permit and they haven't gone through rulemaking or are not tied to a specific rule, they may have to go through rulemaking before you can include them in a general permit. And so while that was specific to a particular general permit, the concept still applies. The general permit, as you pointed out, it's a great tool. And as you renew these, you may find that you need new conditions in that general permit. You may say, we didn't have that in the last cycle, but this one should be here. Now, the question then becomes, is this new condition in your proposed permit a rule? Does it meet the definition of a rule? And if it does, you have to go through a rulemaking process before you include it. So it's just a thought that if I include a new provision as I'm developing a renewed general permit, developing it, the question I think should be asked, is this a rule? And that's what the court decision basically held. And it's just one of those things. That's why I asked, have you thought about, has the division thought about how it impacts the development of general NPDES permitting? Is that?
Yes, that's exactly right. I just wanted to explain to make sure that members knew that this was specific to us, a case that already had been taken care of.
Right. Because I don't think anybody would want to go through the whole renewal process, get to the end and then find out, wait a minute, we've included a condition that should have gone through rulemaking. It sort of sets us all back. And it actually prevents the sort of environmental protection that these folks are trying to achieve. So I think it's just something you ask on the front end.
Yes, sir. Thank you for explanation. Anything else? Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a thought on the aquatic piece, the trout, mentioning streams, and then I think I heard rule. Thank you, John, for that clarity. On the rulemaking piece, surface water, groundwater, we're talking about water, trout, streams. Is this going to be surface water? If you're going to take it, the rules are going to go through water quality. And then are you?
No, we've already done that.
I know, but if you start manipulating in a major way, do you not?
Trout rules are done.
The trout rules are done.
Right,
But if we come back and want to make changes, right, in a general permit and it does impact, then we have to come, it's not a rulemaking process.
Well, it would be if it didn't have an underlying statute or rule to it, to that condition. If the condition's kind of naked out there and doesn't have anything, it would have to come back to whichever committee, if that's your question, Commissioner King. It would come back to water quality as a rule to be put in the general permit, but if it has a statute attached to it already, they don't need to come back to us.
I just misunderstood. I thought you said you were going to come back with some rule making piece.
No.
Okay.
No.
No, thank God for that.
No.
Sometimes there's some blessings some days, and this is one of them. Just
No, I'm
forget.
just making sure. I heard.
Okay.
Nothing on the trout.
Yeah, nothing on the trout. That's good.
Richard says no.
You're going to find a new chairman for.
No, yeah.
That was coming back
Oh,
through.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Director's remarks. Thank you for bringing this up. And again, thanks for being willing to put the acronyms up. That helps a whole lot.
Thank you.
Just want to thank the committee for their participation and also staff. This is Caroline's first time in front of the commission, so I thought she did a great job and appreciate her efforts. So that's it. I'll save the rest of my comments for tomorrow, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the chair? Thank you for coming today. Appreciate your interest. If you have comments about NPDES, hopefully we won't get into things that we have to be involved with too tightly, but we will if we need to. I'll put it to you that. I'll say this meeting is adjourned.
And there is lunch ready. It's going to be pizza today. So enjoy.
Where's Ellison at? He's the pizza man.
I want to call this meeting to order. As we call the meeting to order, I want to read off General Statute 138A-15. This mandates that the chair inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to matters before the Environmental Management Commission, Groundwater and Waste Management Committee. If any member has any conflicts of interest or appearance of conflict, please state at this time. Well, good deal. Council, we have quorum. We're good to go. First item of business is to approve minutes from the last meeting. Is there any discussion from the committee on the minutes from last meeting? And I note there were several questions that Commissioner Keen, Mr. Gibson, which unfortunately is not here today, and Chair Solomon had. DWM sent out a response to those questions sometime about a month ago. Is that correct, Director Michael? Sorry. Did those answers answer your questions, Mr. King? Yeah, okay. So all good. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes?
Commissioner Reardon makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Yarborough seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. First item on the agenda. So we have a one action item, this meeting and two information items. First item on the agenda is an action item. Mr. Michael Rogers is going to do a presentation on the groundwater well standards for review. Mr. Rogers. One of the few people in here with good hairstyle.
Exactly. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Rogers. I am the Underground Injection Control Program Manager, UIC for short, for the Division of Water Resources. And what I'm going to do today is brief you on the 2026 periodic review of 15A NCAC 02C rules. And the 2C rules are divided three sections: 0.0100, which covers water supply wells; 0.0200, which includes injection wells; and 0.0300, which includes water supply wells. Thank you. Per General Statute 150B-21.3A, all rules are required to be reviewed every 10 years. Agencies are to place rules into one of two categories: either unnecessary or necessary. Unnecessary are rules that the agency determines to be obsolete, redundant, or otherwise not needed. If it does not fall into that category, then the rules become necessary. And we have determined that all of our rules that we're proposing for readoption are necessary. The agency will accept public comments for 60 days for these rules. The agency will finalize a report, including a response to comments, if any, and will submit to the Rules Review Commission for review. General Statute 8787, North Carolina Well Construction Act, authorizes the MC to adopt rules governing location, construction, repair, and abandonment of wells, the operation of water wells or well systems with a design capacity of 100,000 gallons per day or more, and the installation and repair of pumps and pumping equipment. The purpose of the North Carolina Well Construction Act is to safeguard the public welfare, safety, and health, and to protect and beneficially develop the groundwater resources of the state of North Carolina. As I mentioned, there was three sections. The first section in 2C is 0.0100. This is the criteria and standards applicable to water supply and certain other types of wells. A permit must be obtained from the division for any well or well system with a design capacity to pump 100,000 gallons per day or more, temporary or permanent monitoring wells or monitoring well systems, recovery wells, and wells with a deviation from the standards, including wells for which a variance is required. Here are some examples of water supply wells. The two images on the left are potable water supply wells, and the image on the right is a non-potable water supply well. The two images on the left is a schematic of a residential water supply well, where water is pumped from the aquifer and run to the house, the holding tank, for their use, domestic use. The image in the middle is a photograph of a well head for a potable well that would go to the house line would run from that pump head to the house. The image on the right is a non-potable irrigation well. That probably has a capacity of 100,000 gallons per day or more. Here are some examples of non-water supply wells. These are images of a monitoring well. There's a schematic on the left showing the construction of the monitoring well, the casing, the grout, the screen, the wellhead. The image in the middle is a picture of a monitoring well with a protective casing and ballards around it to protect it from being run over by bush hogs or lawnmowers or other type of vehicles. The image on the lower right is of a monitoring well that's been installed at grade level in areas where there's a lot of high traffic. So traffic can drive over it without damaging it. Right below that manhole is a PVC pipe with a cap on it for the monitoring well. The purpose of them is to basically collect groundwater samples and have them taken to a lab for analysis for groundwater quality. Section 0200 is the criteria and standards applicable to injection wells. This regulates injection wells per the Underground Injection Control Program. There are three main types in this section: geothermal heating and cooling wells, contaminated groundwater remediation injection wells, and aquifer storage and recovery wells. North Carolina is a primacy state granted by the EPA to administer this program under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Here are some images of examples of some injection wells. The upper left is a geothermal heating and cooling well where water is pulled from the aquifer, run through an exchange system, and then re-injected back into the aquifer. The lower one on the left is a picture of a closed loop geothermal system where the piping is all self-contained and closed, and those loops are put into a boring and then grouted from top to bottom with bentonite grout. So the top one is an open loop, the bottom one is a closed loop. The schematic on the upper right is of remediation injection wells, where wells are drilled and additives are injected into the wells to remediate contaminated groundwater. In this particular schematic, the groundwater is contaminated with toluene, and they're injecting hydrogen peroxide into the contaminated areas to remediate it. It oxidates it. The lower right is an image of an aquifer storage and recovery well. These wells are built to store potable, treated water during times of plentiful supply of water, to withdraw for storage, to withdraw later during times of drought. (2C0300) is the permitting and inspection of private drinking water wells. This establishes standards for permitting and inspecting private drinking water wells as defined in 8785 and by local county health departments pursuant to General Statute 8797. There are several references in 300 back to 100 governing the well construction requirements for these wells. The grout that's needed, how much grout, casing, size of casing, sand packs, etc., and the wellhead completion. When the rules will be set out for public comment for 30 days, this is a snapshot of the first page of the document where we will have all 51 of our rules listed, itemized, and of course, categorized as necessary. They'll have the citation and the rule name, and last time it was readopted. So this will go out for public review. This is just a snapshot of the first page to give you an idea of what it looks like. The timeline for this, today we're making this presentation on March 11th, and our plan is to have this done and submitted to the RRC by November 20th of this year. So the DWR respectively requests approval to proceed to the EMC with the proposed periodic review of the rules report for O2C.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
I have one question. Where's the dividing line between DEQ and health? Is DEQ rules is just construction standard permitting?
This is the deal on that is in our rules right now, we do have 300. And during this review process, we're going to make some proposed corrections. But right now, there's like a little bit of a overlap. With this readoption process, we're planning on separating them out. But right now, the Department of Health and Human Services has oversight of the private drinking water wells. And they're regulated by each county environmental health department.
Right.
They go out, permits are submitted to them. They go out and examine the site, issue the permit. The county will even go out and observe the grouting of their drinking water well, et cetera.
Gotcha. Committee members, any comments, questions? Mr.
Got a
Wright?
question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is a 10-year.
Yes, sir.
So in the last 7 years, have we learned anything from private wells in relation to the PFAS, all of that was done in the New Hanover, Pender, Brunswick, all the counties that we monitored? Did the department learn anything that we were able to place into this report, or you said changes? So
Right.
I was wondering.
I'll defer to Mr. Rogers here.
Thank you,
My
Mr. Rogers.
my cousin.
Pass that up pretty quick.
Everybody's brothers. Thank you.
Yeah, so there has been extensive testing of private wells in the Wilmington area as well. That's being led by Chemours. It doesn't really impact the rules that we have. That's more of what is in the well, how to clean it up, and what we need to do in order to ensure that people aren't drinking contaminated water. So the rules are a little different than the actual testing and assessment of the status of folks' private drinking water wells.
Mr. Chairman, I just thought of the opportunity it would have been of the hundreds, if not thousands of wells that were, I know the water was looked at, but it certainly was an opportunity to look at how these wells were built over the years and how they might have been, for health purpose, if it's the health department.
Absolutely, and I think that's, the rules do require it to be appropriately, right, installed and appropriately managed. So that's a part of the rules and the well construction piece. So that is all in place. Obviously, older wells will have more probability of getting contaminated because they're not sealed and those kinds of things.
And I seem to remember either Director Scott or Director Rogers we had some discussion in some of the PFAS discussion about some of the detections you were finding. They may have had some construction problems with some of the wells, seeping by grout, that sort of thing, that may have seen some of the detections.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Committee members, any other discussion? If not, can we entertain a motion?
Commissioner Bailey, I move to approve to proceed to the EMC with the proposed periodic review of rules report for O2C.
Okay, Vice Chair so moves. Any second?
I'll second that motion.
Commissioner Reardon seconds the motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. All right, we'll move on to information items. So next item up, Elizabeth is going to present to us on IMAX. As the committee remembers, last meeting, we started having some discussion on IMAX and what they are and some of the aspects around them. We will most likely have several information sessions going into, I guess, a September readoption period of time. So we've got some time to discuss this, get it right, and make sure all the committee members are up to speed on what's going on. Elizabeth's going to talk about some, I'll call them orphan IMAX, I guess, that haven't been dealt with before the rule. And we'll see how this discussion goes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Liebig with the Division of Water Resources. And like was just said, I was here in January to introduce the topic of the O2L 0202 trainer review, the groundwater standards review. And today I'm going to present additional details, and I'll be focusing on the interim maximum allowable concentrations, or the IMAX. So during this review period, the IMAX were evaluated, and we will be proposing that they're either adopted as groundwater standards or propose that they're removed. So this would leave no IMAX at the end of this process. So we've supplied some additional information, some supporting information in the attachments. Attachment 1 is the North Carolina proposed groundwater standards summary table. This provides the key information at a glance for every chemical included in the triennial review, both the IMAX that we will discuss today, as well as the other standards that will be a part of the larger rulemaking package. So attachment B contains the toxicological supporting documents. These documents provide the scientific basis for each proposed standard. For every chemical, there's a summary document and a calculation sheet that shows how the proposed concentration was derived. These materials are provided for all chemicals included in the triennial review, even though today's presentation will specifically be focused on IMAX. So I'll start with a very quick review of the purpose of IMAX and how they are developed. When a groundwater standard has not been established for a substance under O2L 0202, that substance is not permitted in concentrations at or above the PQL, which is the lowest concentration of a substance that can be reliably achieved in a lab, also referred to as a reporting limit. However, any person may request the DWR director to establish an IMAC for that substance. To do so, the requester must submit relevant data necessary to establish a protective level in accordance with paragraphs D and E of the rule. DWR staff review the submitted documentation and calculate a health protective concentration for the chemical of concern. IMACs are calculated the same way as groundwater standards to ensure consistency between the IMACs and the standards themselves. Once the evaluation is complete, the DWR director has the authority to establish, update, or remove an IMAC if certain conditions are met. Specifically, the action must not degrade the quality of groundwater, must not likely cause or contribute to pollution of the waters of the state, and must be protective of public health. Finally, before taking any final action, DWR provides public notice and an opportunity for comment. This comment period lasts at least 30 days, allowing stakeholders and the public an opportunity to review and provide input on the proposed IMAC. So the groundwater quality standards are developed under O2L 0202 subsection D using a structured science-based approach. This is the same process for both IMACs and groundwater quality standards. Each groundwater standard is set as the lowest value among several criteria, including a concentration predictive of non-cancer systemic health effects, a concentration corresponding to an incremental lifetime cancer risk of 1 in a million, taste and odor threshold values, which ensure water remains aesthetically acceptable, the maximum contaminant level established under federal drinking water regulations, and the National Secondary Drinking Water Standard, which addresses aesthetic qualities like taste and color. The most conservative value is selected, which is the most protective of human health. This process is outlined in the rule. To determine the health-based endpoints, which are the non-cancer and cancer endpoints from the previous slide, DWR relies on authoritative sources using the following references in order of preference: EPA Integrated Risk Information System, or IRIS, the EPA Drinking Water Health Advisories, other EPA health risk assessment data, and any additional published health risk assessments and peer-reviewed toxicological data that meet scientific validity standards. So this slide explains how we calculate the non-cancer, health-based groundwater quality standard for an oral exposure pathway. The equation estimates the concentration of a chemical in groundwater that would not be expected to cause non-cancer health effects. The equation is the groundwater quality standard equals the reference dose times body weight times relative source concentration all over the water ingestion rate. Each parameter represents a part of the exposure scenario. The reference dose is the daily exposure level that is considered safe over a lifetime without expected health effects. This is a chemical-specific parameter. The body weight is the average body weight for an adult. The relative source contribution is the fraction of total allowable exposure allocated specifically to drinking water, recognizing that people may be exposed through multiple pathways. This value is 10% for inorganics or 20% for organics. And finally, the water ingestion rate, which is the average amount of water an adult drinks per day. The equation and parameters that are not chemical specific are defined in the O2L rule. So this slide explains how we calculate the cancer health-based groundwater quality standard. For carcinogens, the concentration in groundwater is based on an incremental lifetime cancer risk level of 1 in a million, or 1 times 10 to the minus 6. This means that the standard is set to limit the additional cancer risk from drinking the groundwater to no more than 1 extra case in a population of 1 million people over a lifetime. This risk level is defined in the O2L rule. The equation is shown on the slide and is the groundwater quality standard equals the risk level times body weight divided by the carcinogenic slope factor times the water ingestion rate. Each component reflects how risk from long-term exposure is evaluated. The risk level is the allowable incremental cancer risk set at 10 to the minus 6. Body weight is the average body weight for an adult. The carcinogenic slope factor is a toxicity value that describes the increased cancer risk per unit of chemical intake. This is a chemical-specific parameter. And finally, the water ingestion rate, which is the average amount of water an adult drinks per day. So prior to 2022, IMAX had no expiration pathway, which meant that they could stay in place for years. In 2022, the IMAC rule language in O2L was amended to change that. Now, IMACs are temporary by design. They must either be adopted as groundwater standards or expire based on action by the EMC. Here's how the process now works since 2022. Within 12 months of establishing an IMAC, the DWR director is required to make a recommendation to the EMC. That recommendation will state whether a new groundwater standard should replace the IMAC or whether the IMAC should expire. After that, the EMC decides whether to initiate rulemaking. If rulemaking begins, the IMAC remains in effect until the new standard is adopted or until the EMC decides not to move forward. If the EMC declines to initiate rulemaking, the IMAC would expire. There are 20 IMACs that are currently established. Of these, 16 were put in place prior to 2022 and do not have a pathway to expire. During the 2022 groundwater triennial review, many IMACs were incorporated as groundwater standards. However, some remained as IMACs as more time was needed to do the review. During this triennial review period, we will be recommending that all existing IMACs be either adopted as formal groundwater standards or removed, which would leave no IMACs at the end of this process. The proposal is to incorporate 15 of the IMACs as new groundwater quality standards. Among those, based on the toxicological review, 3 would change to a higher value, 3 would change to a lower value, and 9 would remain at the same value. In addition, 5 IMACs will be proposed for removal. So earlier this year, at the January EMC meeting, these 4 pesticides were approved to move forward into rulemaking. Since that step has already been completed, I won't be covering these chemicals again today. Instead, I'll focus on the remaining IMACs and walk through those in more detail. So for each of the IMACs you'll see in the next set of slides, I'll be providing a consistent set of key information. Each slide shows the current IMAC value alongside the proposed standard and notes the basis for that proposed value. You also see the PQL, which is provided for informational purposes and is not used in the calculations. It was provided by the Water Sciences section unless it has been noted otherwise. Other information presented includes the date the IMAC was originally established and the entity that requested it. It's important to note that in all of these cases, the IMACs were requested to aid in the evaluation of site conditions and in setting health protective groundwater remediation levels at regulated sites. Finally, each slide includes a brief summary of potential impacts across several of our regulatory programs, including hazardous waste facilities, solid waste sanitary landfills, and the inactive hazardous sites program. I won't go through every detail on each slide, but I'll highlight the most important points for understanding the proposed changes and their implications. So starting off for ammonia, the current IMAC and the proposed groundwater standard remain the same at 1,500 micrograms per liter. This value is based on the odor threshold identified in the literature. It was established in 2010 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. In terms of program impacts, there are no expected changes for the hazardous waste facilities program. For solid waste sanitary landfills, the proposed standard expected to be beneficial, ensuring that the compliance level does not revert to the lower PQL value. And for the inactive hazardous sites program, we anticipate little to no effect. For benzaldehyde, the proposed groundwater standard represents a decrease from the current IMAC to 10 micrograms per liter. The update value is driven by updated toxicological information and based on the cancer risk level consistent with the IRIS assessment. It was established in 2011 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation purposes. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. For terc-butanol, the proposed groundwater standard increases from the current IMAC to 70 micrograms per liter. This updated value is supported by the IRIS assessment and is based on a 1 in a million cancer risk. It was established in 2011 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. For ethanol, the proposed groundwater standard increases significantly to 49,000 micrograms per liter. This value is based on the odor threshold identified by US EPA in 1999, which is the most appropriate basis for this compound. It was established in 2011 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. In terms of program impacts, there are no anticipated changes for the hazardous waste facilities program and only minimal effects, if any, for the solid waste sanitary landfills and inactive hazardous sites programs.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
there's, I just
Yes.
got a question. I was on this committee before with Commissioner Bailey, but when you say PQL, is that established by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection?
No, this,
Is that NJDEP meeting?
Right, Division of Waste Management would be able to answer more specifically, but the PQL is lab dependent, and that was provided as what the basis that they can test for ethanol was. And I think the reference was the New Jersey Department.
Yeah, but that's not even the definition of PQL. What the New Jersey department does, I mean, I don't know what the California department does or Louisiana department. That's what, it's PQL is defined as a lab standard, right?
It is.
And for North Carolina, it shouldn't be based on what New Jersey tells us it is. Should there?
So what they're saying is they're defaulting to the laboratory detection and quantification on the New Jersey department, but not on what the state lab here is doing. If that's
what I
correct.
understand it to be. And somebody else may have a higher PQL formula or lower. I don't know, but I don't know why we follow New Jersey. Would be my question. Why do we follow New Jersey?
I don't know if Jessica's able to, or Bridget, thank you.
Bridget Shelton with Division of Water Resources. So this PQL is just provided for informational purposes. Our water sciences section does not have a PQL for ethanol. So we had to find a value to use while doing the regulatory impact analysis.
Okay, so we went through this last time, but some of these don't have PQLs. You don't even have test methods for, so you're proxying off another, you're proxying ethanol off methanol. And you're having to go all the way to New Jersey to find it because we don't have one.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
But we plan to establish a standard for it, right? That's what you're proposing here. When we don't have a methodology to test for it. Or we don't have a methodology to test at the level that you're quoting New Jersey Department. I don't know. You have to answer that.
Yeah, the underground storage tank supervisors are with us, but if I'm not mistaken, this is in a VOC scan for our underground storage tank facilities. So it's part of a volatile organic compound scan right now. We'll be glad to help with DWR clarifying the New Jersey DEP reference. Yeah, we're going to use the PQL that comes in, to Chair Solomon's point, for the lab that the consultant or the permittee used. This, I think, is noted in the asterisk, is just kind of a reference for informational purposes, what a general PQL level would be. So we'll be glad to further clarify that, but it is part of the VOC scan for UST facilities. Point being, it's more than one facility. Ethanol's common in gasoline now, right? Ethanol blends. For our permitted thousands of gas stations in North Carolina, it would be beneficial to have this as a standard. And DWR has calculated a value that is higher than the current IMAC, is the other take-home message. And that would be beneficial to our regulated facilities as well. But before we come back as an action item, we'll help to clarify the PQL piece, but it is part of our VOC scans.
Like I was saying too, we're probably going to have a series of information sessions on this, so that'll be one we need to discuss.
Yeah, because follow-on point is we don't go to rulemaking. We're going to drop back. And it's deceptive to say it's 70 parts per. If our choice is 70 or 49,000, okay, that's great. But if it's not 70, then we need to know what the PQL would be, because if we don't make this a rule, it's going to fall back to PQL. Not even sure why it's regulated at all, but we need that most accurate PQL because we may not take this in the rule. And that's what the standard would be the PQL.
Yep, correct.
So what are you using today?
So today we would use
4,000?
today we'd be using the 4,000. Yes, because that's the IMAC.
Okay.
But as you know, some of these compounds may not be the main driver when we're getting in groundwater from a gas station, right? There may be certain other drivers that are dictating assessment and corrective action. But the answer to your question is 4,000.
And I know enough chemistry to be dangerous, but it's also dangerous to be proxying off some other compound and say that's what it should be for this.
Yep.
You're not even proxying ethanol, you're using methanol as your proxy here.
But yes, fair point. If the commission doesn't move forward on the suggestion, then clearly understanding the relevant PQL, that's what it would default to. We need to be clear on. You know, we may have some facilities that would be concerned about that, but obviously that's part of the rulemaking process too.
Yes.
It's also concerning we have an established 2011 IMAC that we're still using that standard, and we have no other standard to go with too, so, yeah.
Bridget could probably, that went through, as Commissioner Bailey knows, she chaired it. We went through this in probably 2017, and we chose not to do some of them for reasons, right? We did 50, I think, but we didn't do, or 39 or something, but we didn't do all of them. So I think that's what was left over, and I don't remember why we, and why we did some of them.
Yep, gotcha.
Either.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Okay. Moving to the next constituent. For ETBE, the proposed groundwater standard decreases significantly from 47 micrograms per liter down to 1 microgram per liter. This proposed value is driven by odor-based considerations using literature values. It was established in 2011 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. For perchlorate and its salts, the proposed groundwater standard remains unchanged at 2 micrograms per liter. This value continues to be supported by the non-cancer threshold concentration from IRIS. It was established in 2010 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. In terms of program impacts, no changes are expected for the hazardous waste facilities program or for the solid waste sanitary landfills. For the inactive hazardous sites program, we anticipate little to no effect. For PCBs, the proposed groundwater standard remains unchanged at 0.09 micrograms per liter. This value continues to be supported by the cancer risk level of 1 in a million, consistent with the IRIS assessment. It was established in 2010 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. For TAME, the proposed groundwater standard decreases from the current IMAC of 128 micrograms per liter to 8 micrograms per liter. This proposed change is driven by the odor threshold reported in literature. It was established in 2011 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. For tetrahydrofuran, the proposed groundwater standard remains the same as the current IMAC at 2,000 micrograms per liter. This value is based on the odor threshold cited in literature and referenced by the EPA in 2012, which continues to be the most appropriate basis for this compound. It was established in 2021 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. In terms of program impacts, we don't expect changes for the hazardous waste facilities program. For solid waste sanitary landfills, maintaining this standard is expected to be beneficial, ensuring compliance level does not revert to the lower PQL value. And for the inactive hazardous sites program, the impact should be minimal, if any. For p-toluic acid, the proposed groundwater standard increases slightly from the current IMAC of 35 micrograms per liter to 40 micrograms per liter. This value is based on a non-cancer threshold concentration from the EPA's provisional peer-reviewed toxicity value. It was requested in 2014 by Hercules for site characterization and potential remediation. We expect limited implementation impacts, if any, across our regulatory programs. And finally, for vinyl acetate, the proposed groundwater standard remains the same as the current IMAC at 88 micrograms per liter. This value continues to be supported by the odor threshold identified in literature. It was established in 2010 and requested by the Division of Waste Management for site characterization and potential remediation. In terms of program impacts, we anticipate little to no changes for the hazardous waste facilities program. For solid waste sanitary landfills, maintaining this standard is expected to be beneficial, ensuring compliance level does not revert to the lower PQL value. For the inactive hazardous sites program, any impacts should be minimal. So this slide covers the IMACs that we will be recommending for removal. These are chemicals where there is a lack of adequate toxicity studies available and there's an inability to develop a groundwater standard in accordance with selection criteria defined in 15A NCAC 02L 0202. For each compound, you'll see the current IMAC value, the available PQL information, and a brief note on potential program impacts. Overall, most of these compounds show little to no anticipated impact across our regulatory programs if their IMACs are removed. 2 chemicals, dibromomethane and 1,2-dichloroethylene, may lead to increased costs for certain programs because their regulatory limits would revert back to the PQL. For the remaining compounds for removal, we do not anticipate notable impacts. There is more detailed information provided in the attachments for these compounds. So as a reminder, the triennial review will be happening concurrently with the approved O2L rule readoption schedule, which is shown on this slide. An important date to keep in mind is September 2026, which is when we'll be back before this committee asking for approval to take these recommendations forward to the EMC. Any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have just a couple real quick before I turn it over to committee. What's the method to the madness for the removal of certain of these compounds versus others when slide number 22, you've got some that have little no impact as the reason. And then if you move up to like slide 20, no impacts to hazardous waste program, no impacts to solid waste program, no impact to inactive. So what's the difference between them?
So the proposal is not based on the impacts, but rather the toxicological information. So each of the IMACs was reviewed for any changes in the toxicological information. And these 5 here had changes and their tox data is not either withdrawn or no confidence in, or the uncertainty factors were too great. So there were problems with the toxicological information for these 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Reardon, go ahead.
Can we go back to slide 20 just for a question? So in this case, we're talking about establishing a standard, but we have no established PQL level. How do we do that? How do we establish a standard if we don't know what the PQL level is?
Well, the standards are based on health based concentrations. The PQL, I would divert more to Director Scott for information.
That's the laboratory quantification level that they can repeat their analyses, correct? And how do we establish a standard if we don't know what the laboratory's capability is to establish a repeatable testing level?
Yeah, I think here, look at the chair, make sure. Here, I believe this is the one unique one that Waste Management didn't request, meaning it went to DWR as the Hercules site. So the footer starts out, as I understand it, and Bridget, Elizabeth may have to help me, but if the Water Sciences doesn't have a PQL, they're trying to provide a reference value for a PQL. And so it's a legitimate question. Why is there not a number listed there? I don't know a lot about this site. I think it went directly to Water Resources. I'm not sure, if there's still analytical testing associated with this site. I think we talked about it the first time we went through the IMAX, the Hercules site.
Right, yeah, thank you. Bridget Shelton with Water Resources. I'm not a chemist, so I'm gonna caveat that. The PQL is irrespective of the test method. So just because there is not a defined PQL for a constituent does not mean we can't test for it. The PQL is its own process,
It
a
just means you can
laboratory.
repeat it.
Yeah, it's a
level in which
reporting
you
limit
can-
that can be repeated, like a laboratory defines a PQL for each for certain constituents, but just because you don't have a PQL or can't find one, doesn't mean that they can't test for it.
Well, you're showing it in your mass spec, probably, but when you go back and do your individual analysis, you're confirming that you can repeat that analysis for the compound in which you've identified. Is that correct? Help me, so therefore.
Default to a chemist and follow up.
Well, we're establishing a standard in which we've not established a PQL level that a lab can repeatedly test and identify the compound and confirm the compound.
And I just want to clarify too, DWR or Waste Management, we don't establish PQLs. They're not written in our rule. Their PQLs are not in the O2L rule. We are providing these for informational purposes, and we often need a PQL in order to do that fiscal note.
But we don't have it.
We were not able to find one for this compound.
And what you're saying, Commissioner Reardon, is the way it looks now is they're not even a repeatable method to get 35 UGL, let alone, any other.
We're establishing a standard in which we do not have a known PQL level for that compound.
Right.
In the matrices of choice.
We will follow up, but I believe there is a test method for paratoluic acid. So labs can measure for it. We just could not find a PQL value.
Okay. Well, let's note it in next information session and.
We're not a right or wrong. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Mr. Bailey.
I had two questions, but one was on PCBs where there is a PQL, but it looks like the proposed standard is less than the PQL. So PQL means that's what the labs can test for, and anything less than the PQL, how can that be a standard?
Well, the standard would be health-based, so the default would be the PQL. So that would be the enforceable limit would be the PQL when the standard is below the PQL.
Okay. The other point I wanted to make, and Director Scott mentioned this to me, one of the issues we've had in the past is how many sites do these IMAX apply to? And so Director Scott, I just wanted everybody to know, he assured me that these standards that are being proposed right now do apply to multiple sites. It's not like just one site, other than, I guess, maybe that Hercules site.
Yeah, so that is correct. We're gonna, for the next time this is presented, try to have that specific item noted. We know it's been important to the committee and the commission, how many sites actually use the IMAC. And as you said, Vice Chair Bailey, the Hercules site, we believe, is unique. Other examples, whether it's ethanol, ammonia, tetrahydrofuran, multiple sites, meaning plural. Landfills, gas stations, we can have a laundry list, but it's probably not needed, meaning it's more than 2 or 3. It's multiple sites. But for the next time this is presented, since this is the information item, we had said that we would include that information from our files. But a good
Wanted
portion of
everybody
them
to
are
know.
multiple sites, and we know there's been interest when the number is just for one unique site. The committee has asked to be clear on that, so we'll make sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yarborough.
One of your earlier slides, it has those 4 chemical pesticides. Could you go back to those? And I know I was not here, but how in the world did that get back on there? I don't understand it. It's beyond me that you would have these 4. On AI just a little bit ago, I put, how many pesticides are there? 16,000 plus, and they don't even know how many. When you add up here, so are you gonna start doing every pesticide known to man to put it in here? How much time do y'all have to do this kind of? These are, I don't understand how that happened. I thought we got, in the committee, we decided not to do that.
Committee recommended to the full EMC that not to move forward for rulemaking. Full EMC voted to move forward to rulemaking and brought it back to the committee. So that's what.
That's my question to you is how do you, if you want to pick any one you want, I can give you probably over 100 that I've right off the top of my head of pesticides that are used in common. Then if you use the 16,000 that you got at your house, are we going to do every single thing like that? Is that what you want to do? It don't make any sense. But that's me personally now. I mean,
Let me say this, we can pick which of these we want to do or don't want to do, and we can get rid of them. And these 4 were clearly, what I heard from the commission at the time was we didn't want to go forward with any of these.
That's what, because there's one site picked out because of where it was, and it's a research site that you would expect these type of agricultural chemicals to be used.
And on the technicality that council pointed out, we did say to send it back to committee Okay, so that's on the side of we need to bring it back to committee and consider it. So you're going to consider here. We didn't vote to initiate rulemaking. We voted to bring it back to committee to consider to initiate rulemaking with it, I believe. Or did we say rulemaking?
We voted to initiate rulemaking.
Commission voted to initiate
To go
rulemaking.
out, public comment. Huh?
No,
It's
the
just to
commit-
initiate rulemaking.
Okay.
I did go back and look at the minutes. on
Which,
that one.
which again, I think could be challenged because clearly the 12 months has elapsed. Clearly, these do not have fiscal notes done on them, the IMAX. It's questionable whether, if it was pointed to RRC or the General Assembly, they look at this and say, this is even a valid program anymore. But certainly the agreement that was reached in 2022 was 12 months. They expired if we didn't take action.
Yeah.
These are well over 12 months. So it's a generous, in my opinion, it's generous to bring it back to committee to let the committee consider it. But if the committee or EMC cuts it down here, it cuts down here at the triennial review and it's over. So y'all have to decide what you want to do with these. If you want to get rid of them, just get rid of them.
Well, they sound.
We wanna keep 'em, we
they
need to do
sound
a fiscal.
terrible. But let's do 16,000 of them. Let's do them all. Let's make sure everybody has, we can hire, how many people can you hire to do all that? Yeah, makes no sense, but that's all. How I really feel. If you tell you how I really feel, I'd say take a motion to get rid of them. But I can't get rid of the information out of it.
Well, clearly this was for one place, for a research station,
Yes. But you would expect to have.
not grounds for statewide rule, and something we didn't want to do, something that's decided to come back to us on a technicality. I could say legally it could probably be challenged the other direction anyway. But nevertheless, it's on the books now, and we need to decide whether to let it go or to keep it. And that's what we'll do in this round.
Well, this committee recommended and then officially recommended to the EMC twice. The EMC voted on it last meeting and said, send it back to rulemaking to the committee. So here's where we are. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying this is where we are.
Isn't, I
Mr.
can
Chairman,
check the minutes, but is anyone else remembering? I think last time it was brought up that at least one of these is in greater use than at that one site.
These are all widely used pesticides.
Okay.
I don't know that, like I stated very
Okay.
poignantly in the commission meeting, I don't know the relevance of the widely used versus why we're doing this, but yes.
Okay, well, it
And
was
the
just the
rates-
comments were making it sound like they were just used at one research site, so,
No,
or I
the
guess
IMAG was established only for that one site.
only for that one site.
And the reason for it was that these are, 3 of them are a chemical, a company's primary materials. So they use them on these research stations. They have to use them for all kinds of data. So they, when they wanted to sell that piece of property or change that piece of property, they realized those numbers are going to be there because some of them were 10 times, 20 times probably what the rate would be to try to test it for all the health effects and everything to even get registered. When you put those up there, it makes it sound like, oh, these are just horrible materials. Some of them are 1/10 of the acre, ounce to the acre rates. I mean, all I'm saying is if you're going to pick those 4, I want you to pick them all. Just do them all. And you can hire, 10,000 people to do 16,000 of them to figure out a way. Oh, well.
So we've got to move on.
I know,
Yeah, appreciate the rant.
Wish I'd been here. I'm sorry I got hurt.
I couldn't care to water for you.
Committee members, do you have any further discussion? If not, we need to close up and move to the next item and, yeah, we have a pretty hard deadline for Water Quality Committee. Any more discussion? Okay, Director Scott, Elizabeth, I think you got your charge for next information session and, next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, Jessica, you're up for, final information item. And this information item is about the dry cleaning solvent cleanup fund and the rule readoption for it.
Good afternoon, Jessica Monte with the Division of Waste Management, presenting the readoption of information item on the readoption of existing rules, O2S, rules and criteria for the administration of the dry cleaning solvent cleanup fund. So we're just bringing you this as an information item before we bring it to you as an action item at the next meeting in May.
We got 4 minutes to Jessica.
I'm sorry?
We have 4 minutes.
Okay, I will be.
It really is.
It is.
So we may, if you'd like, we can also just skip to, do you have any questions that we can come back with next time, but you can start me.
Let's do that. The
Okay.
committee, I'm assuming everybody's looked at the materials. Does anyone have any questions for Jessica?
And then we can bring responses at the next meeting when we do this as an action item, if that works.
So we'll duly count the information as the information provided, and there's no questions. Thank you, Jessica, for such a speedy.
This is the shortest one I've ever. Thank you.
You get the prize today, Jessica.
We need a motion, right?
No, it's information.
Oh, it's information. That was good.
All right, Director Scott, we've got, March 12th, 2026 EMC meeting agenda items for Water Quality Committee, or Groundwater Waste Management Committee is none. Future committee meetings, do you want to cover those items real quick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the future committee meetings expected May or possibly July this year, an action item for the dry cleaning rules that Jessica just touched on briefly, and also an action item to proceed to the EMC with periodic rule review for our hazardous waste, solid waste, and inactive hazardous sites rule 13A, 13B, and 13C, and a possible information item on the readoption of the 2T rules for petroleum contaminated soil remediation. I think
And
that's it, Mr.
information
Chairman.
on IMAX as well.
Yes.
Any further comments, Director Scott?
No.
Director Rogers? T-minus 1 minute, counting. Okay, thank you, sir. Any other comments from committee members? Hearing none, I now declare this meeting adjourned.
Like to get started and read call the order and the notice. The statute, North Carolina General Statute 13.8A, 15 mandates that at the beginning of any meeting of the board, the chair shall remind all members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest under the subchapter. The chair also shall inquire as to whether there are any known conflicts of interest with respect of any matters coming before the board at this time. Are there any? Board members? Thank you for that. Approval of the minutes. The draft has been presented. The data's been launched on the agenda 2 weeks prior to this meeting, so certainly have had time to go over the information. So I'll stand for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Commissioner Ellison, thank you. Motion's made to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jennifer, thank you. Zavaleta.
And just an observation, I love the seating arrangement.
Go ahead, do it good. It's been seconded. Any discussion on those minutes? Please say aye if you approve.
Aye.
Aye.
No for disapproval. Thank you. We have one information on the docket today, PFAS testing in food across the nation and in North Carolina. Be introducing Mark Hartman, Director of the Office of Food Chemical Safety, Director Supplements and Innovation at the Food and Drug Administration. We've done a lot of this FDA. It's come up a lot over the last 6, 8, a year that the PFAS, 1,4, all of the above. And I'm glad that Chair Solomon is here today as an ex officio. He arranged this today. It's our first one that we've done virtually like this. So I would like to thank the department and IT for putting this together like you've done. I really appreciate that. I see the director on the screen here. And he's behind me, so that's good. We're doing a good job. The IT department needs to be commended for their work and having this done. But with that said, all of that we've discussed, FDA, EPA and Region 4, but FDA, we finally got some traction today. So I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Solomon, who'd like to have a few words. And then I'm going to ask Commissioner Reardon if he would introduce Mark to us. But Chairman Solomon, you wanted to open the floor.
Yeah, and the order, we'll try to do this. I want to give just a little bit of background of just a little bit where we got here and what we're doing today. And then I want to turn it over to Vice Chair Reardon, who's on this committee, who will talk about some of the data that's on our website from the FDA. And then as he goes through that data, he's going to introduce Mark's got a couple questions and stuff, but he's not doing a presentation. And I think Mark will tell you when it comes time, the data stands for the data, and that's what FDA has. But Joe will share a little bit. But let me go back for people that weren't here, or just for the public, and I'm going to try to be gentle with what was some vicious type meetings and committee meetings. But it happened the pinnacle happened in September of 2024. And while we're doing food, for those who don't know, is when we did our regulatory impact analysis, our physical note, 75% of the benefits of doing a surface water standard, and this is in table 20 of that report, are from non-drinking water benefits. And if you go back to F4 in the appendix of that report, it says food is 3 times more impactful than water is. And so food was a very big part of this. And that report also said, by the calculations and models and everything we did, 25% of North Carolinians are exposed. 25% of North Carolinians are exposed. 25% of the food consumed by North Carolinians have PFAS contamination. And that sparked off a round of big debate. Where did you get your information from? Where is that written down? I'm not going to go through all that. That is, by the way, for the record, that is false. That is not proven. That is not even close to being documented. And you're going to hear some of those documentations today. So what happened in that meeting of this committee was that until we could get with FDA and get a very clear guide path on how much of the food in North Carolina was impacted by surface water from PFAS, that we would not move forward on a numeric standard. Okay. Part 2 of that motion was, and we would work on that. We were going to work on that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But part 2 of that was we would do a monitoring and minimization plan. So while we couldn't agree on the amount of food that was impacted or contended a lot of things in that regulatory impact analysis beyond food, food was just the biggest one. We went to basically say, what can we agree on? And we said monitoring and minimization would be what we could agree on while we got food data or we got more clarification or agreement on a numeric surface water standard. Now, what happened after the September meeting was, if you guys remember, there was a little disaster called Hurricane Helene came around, and it knocked a lot of this state and a lot of the department kind of down, and everybody had to scramble for Helene for a number of months. Another thing happened right after that meeting, or I guess in early November, was a new federal administration came in and a new EPA started to take form. So we had Helene and we had the new EPA. I was pressing for as the chair, getting the monitoring and minimization rules that we just approved back in January on the street. Let the old commission vote on those, since we'd been through it, somewhere between March and July. Hopefully the old commission could have settled that. Some of you were new and had to settle that in January. But we could walk and chew gum at the same time. So we could do that piece of it. And that took most of last year to do for those reasons I just mentioned. But also we didn't give up on the FDA food part, because in August I got with Vice Chair Reardon, and he said he knew quite a few people at FDA because that's one of the places he's an expert on food. And we found Mark, and Vice Chair Reardon and I sat down with Mark, which was 6 months after the new administration. And we had a conference call and said, Mark, what's going on with EPA with all the testing and whatnot with PFAS in food? And I'll let Mark or Vice Chair Reardon reframe it, but it was the Trump administration is looking at a lot of stuff in baby food. We've done some testing in bottled water. We're aiming at these vulnerable populations and things like metals in the baby food. Of course, we'll look for PFAS and other things, but a broad testing of PFAS in food was not in that first 6 months of the Trump administration. Vice Chair Reardon and I wanted to sit down with Mark again at the end of last year and talk again to round the year out. But if you guys remember, there was a federal government shutdown in that period of time. And for about 2 months, we didn't have much information. So here we are trying to come back, and Vice Chair Reardon has done some research and pulled some stuff off the FDA website that's publicly available. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to go over that information that's in the public record of food and PFAS contamination, and then you can introduce Mark from there. So any questions to me? I think it's important to know the history and the path we're on, and that we are, while we're trying to do monitor minimization, we want to do numeric standards, but we've got to go back to that RIA and some of the federal standards and the knowledge that we know and say what would be the right levels and the right constituents to attack. So.
Thank you, Chair Solomon.
Okay, with that, Commissioner Reardon, I guess.
Chair Reardon.
Thank you so much, Chair Solomon, and thank you, Chair, for this. We greatly do appreciate having Mark Hartman here today, and I'll introduce him in just a second. But as Chairman Solomon talked about, there's a lot of information, and I think we posted that as well. And FDA, when you look at who's responsible for our food supply, 80% of the foods consumed today reside under FDA. So we got the right person here to have that conversation today. To FDA's benefit, they've done a lot of sampling where they look at what are those foods that are most routinely consumed by the American constituency. And they've done a tremendous job on posting the material and the samples that they've collected. FDA does something called a total diet study. They do that for a variety of things, but in this context, FDA's collected about 1,900 samples looking for the PFAS compounds that they can test for. That's a lot of samples over a lot of different matrices and a lot of different commodities that are routinely consumed by the American public. I think it's encouraging to find that FDA says that no PFAS have been detected in over 90, let me get this correct. No PFAS have been detected above their method of detection limit in over 95% of the samples they've collected. Actual numbers, 1,290 out of the 1,352 were fresh processed foods tested in the total diet study. FDA concluded in their research that this may be due to several factors, including the lack of PFAS uptake by the product in which they were testing, the lack of PFAS found in the growing and manufacturing environment, or limitations in the current testing and methodology. They did report that 62 of the total diet samples collected where one or more PFAS were detected, and 46 of those samples were seafood. And I think we can take comfort that our federal program doing the testing, looking across all these different products, have done quite a bit of testing. They've been very transparent in the results in which they found. They even did some testing outside of Chemours, which is obviously something very, very important to us. There are currently 10 PFAS compounds for which there are toxicological reference values that are used to assess the potential health concerns for levels found in food as a result of environmental contamination. The point is FDA has not been asleep. They've been out running samples, better understanding exactly how these compounds are taken up by foods, what in the environmental contamination can be, and how that results in the foods that they're testing. The one thing I can say is that as working with FDA every day, it's exciting to know that they have put a single person in charge of this very important space. As with many federal agencies, you may have multiple people involved in a certain thing. FDA made a decision over a year ago to have one person that's actually over this. I think that was wise insight on FDA, and I applaud what they've done. But today we do have, and we are thankful that Mark Hartman is with us today. A little background on Mark. He has 35 years experience working on chemical risk assessment, risk management issues in the federal government. So he's no stranger to federal service and service for the people. Mark is currently the Director of Office of Food Chemical Safety, Dietary Supplements, and Innovation in the Human Foods Program at FDA. His office is responsible for the pre-market food chemical reviews, including GRAS notices. We've heard a lot about that lately. Food additive petition and color additives. We've heard a lot about that. So Mark, you've been busy. And food contact notification. His office is also responsible for dietary supplement, regulatory program, post-market review programs for food chemicals in the nation food supply, the contaminants program, including Closer to Zero and biotech. You've heard a lot about that with children products, infant formulas, and infant foods. Prior to joining FDA, Mark spent 27 years at EPA, which we have a lot of people in here familiar with EPA, including previous EPA employees. Mark served as the Deputy Director of Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxins, where he was responsible for administering and implementing the Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, with an emphasis on the oversight of post-market chemical prioritization, risk evaluation, risk management program. I don't know how he ever sleeps. Prior to this role, Mark served in multiple leadership positions in the Office of Pesticide Programs, overseeing the pre- and post-market risk assessment regulatory work for pesticides. He holds a master's degree from George Washington University and Syracuse University. And so really what I say is we're very thankful, Mark, to have you with us today. What a very nice resume that you have. The most important thing is you work in this space every day. You're leading FDA's efforts on this. Appreciate the time that you spent with Chair Solomon and I earlier, and want to welcome you to this committee. And Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you. I think you may have some questions for Mark.
Or Director Hartman, I think it should be Mark. Everyone's calling you Mark. I've not met you before, but we're going to take our jackets off like you there, and it's going to be a fireside chat for hopefully maybe 30 minutes of your time. But want to thank you again as we can glean from you. And we're very fortunate to have 7 committee members here today, and 2 of them actually appointed by our agricultural Troxler here in North Carolina. Our Troxler would be a he's not secretary. It's Secretary Commissioner Troxler. Yes, I want to forgive me. But we're very honored to have you to again glean from your knowledge. I'm very thankful. So as Mark, we've got a few questions. Certainly not to ambush you here, but I did share those with you yesterday in reference to these questions. And we may have some committee members that might have questions, but we can, because it's virtual, I did that for clarity and convenience for you. And but thank you again. Before we get into that, Mark, would you like to have a few words?
Sure. No, first, I wanted to thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you all today. And I think I'll launch in and give a little bit of an overview of where we are in the PFAS space, and I think it'll answer some of your questions. And then, of course, I'd be happy to try to field as many questions as I can. And it's good to see. Appreciate Joe. I know, and our work together, and also Jennifer. I don't know if you remember me or not, but I certainly remember you from your days. So it's good to see you again. So my office is responsible for a bunch of things, as Joe mentioned, but particularly relevant to PFAS are 2 areas. One is we do have authorizations for different PFAS substances for use in food contact and food packaging, which are authorizations that my office is responsible for. And I also have responsibility for the contaminants program. And a lot of the focus on contaminants in foods has been on heavy metals through the Closer to Zero program. But I also do have responsibility for other contaminants, including PFAS and others. So that's how my office fits in. And I have a team of the scientists that are doing the risk assessments as well as do the risk management work for contaminants and those authorizations related to PFAS. Just to give you a sense of some of the work that we've been actively doing in the PFAS space, and just for those of you who I don't know, I spent quite a bit of time with PFAS in my former job, so I have maybe know more about it than I'd like to on some days. But a couple of things. One is we do have a number of citizen petitions that are before us. So when I talk about the work that we do, some of what I'm going to describe are initiatives that we're taking on, and some of them are related to petitions we get from citizens or from environmental groups or from industry or from wherever to take some sort of action under FFTCA. We have 3 active petitions in the PFAS space, 2 of which probably are not as much of an interest to this commission. One related to the fluorination of plastic containers that is also something that EPA has been wrestling with over the course of years. We have an active petition there. We also have an active petition to deauthorize all of the remaining food contact authorizations, things like gaskets in food processing plants, et cetera. And we also have one that was much broader that was looking to set tolerances and or action levels for PFAS in like 30 plus commodities. So we're working our way through those through our petition process, and we'll continue to work on those. But I just want you to be aware of those. Those are publicly available as well. We take comment on those petitions when they come in, and we work those as resources allow. Joe mentioned earlier kind of the data collections. I'll start there. You mentioned TDS, and I'm glad that you did. I mean, TDS has been collecting, that's a total diet survey, which is meant to be a market basket for the entire nation. It's been looking at PFAS substances since 2019, and that's for how we use it. I mean, part of it is just this broad survey, which is transparent to the public, that gives people an understanding of what we're finding in the food supply across a broad array of contaminants and other chemistries. And a specific example of how we use TDS in the context of PFAS is, as Joe mentioned, we collected data. We found that there were we weren't finding PFAS, but where we were finding it was in clams and other types of seafood. So typically what we do with TDS data is we don't use that to go out and start to do regulatory work, because that's not what it's designed for. But we would say, okay, well, here's an issue that's been raised through that sampling, and we'll do additional surveys targeted at those sort of commodities to determine whether or not there is a problem that we have to take on. In that particular case, what we did, we did additional surveys. So we did another survey of seafood in 2022. Then we did additional surveys of clams in particular in 2023 and 2024. And as a result of that work, we ended up doing an import alerts for 8 firms who were importing clam products into the United States that were contaminated with PFAS at levels that we thought were problematic. So that's an example of how you go from these broad surveys to more focused surveys to the place where you feel like you have enough evidence to take some sort of action or not. Other areas where we've collected data specifically on PFAS beyond seafood is in bottled water, as Joe mentioned, and we're continuing to collect additional data specifically on seafood. That's been going on for the last couple of years as well. In addition to those data, that's our typical data collection process and how we use that information. Secretary Kennedy announced early in his tenure Operation Stork Speed, which I'm sure some of you remember. Specifically, that's a program looking at enhancing the safety of infant formula. One of the tenets, or one of the projects that came out of that effort, was a pretty significant data collection on infant formula products. Over 350 or so samples were collected and analyzed. And recently we announced that we expect that data will be available for at least most of the contaminants we looked at in April. That looked at heavy metals, as you might imagine, but it also looked at PFAS and pesticide residues and glyphosate and phthalates and some other things as well. So that data will also be out there specific to infant formula. Again, another source of a market basket type information. And it's not clear to us yet exactly how or what we'll do as a result of that data collection, but I would expect it to be similar to what I described earlier of what we do with TDS, that we would identify where there might be problem areas and do additional sampling and go that route. We also can and may consider doing what we call action levels, and you've seen action levels that have been done. And again, this is through the Closer to Zero program, which is focused on kids and kids' foods, where we've done action levels for levels of lead in baby food, for instance, and put those out as a regulatory tool that we use to try to drive down contaminant levels. If we were to do something like that for PFAS, like I said, we have a petition asking us to do that very broadly, and I will say that we don't have data available to us to really look at PFAS levels in a lot of these commodities. Certainly not to the amount of information that we would have, that we'd feel comfortable doing a scientific assessment on to underpin an action level. That being said, there are areas, like I mentioned, seafood and clams in particular, but also we're continuing to collect data on seafood because we know that is an area where PFAS tends to be found. as well as we do have that data that we collected on bottled water, and since EPA is doing work in the Safe Drinking Water Act, we do have obligations to follow through on bottled water in that as well. So if I were to anticipate areas where we're going to be thinking about setting action levels, or whether we have the information to set action levels, it would be in those particular areas, not more broadly in other agricultural commodities. So as we look in 2026 and where our priorities are, again, we're going to continue to do data collection specifically for PFAS. We're targeting seafood. The stork speed I mentioned, as that data becomes available, we'll probably be considering whether or not we would consider action levels for PFAS in baby formula, but probably more in the metals arena than in the PFAS arena per se. Because again, as you all are very aware, I mean, there's so many different PFAS chemistries. There are not tox values that have been identified for many of them. Some of the tox values that have been identified are hotly debated even today. So we'll continue to work with our federal partners at EPA and elsewhere in the federal government. We're very aware and tied into the PFAS work that's going on that would potentially inform the type of work that we do here at FDA. And we also do case-by-case assessments if we, through our normal monitoring work across the food supply, or if we find PFAS in certain situations or we'll do individual case-by-case assessments of that particular situation, like we did for the clams, and set up that import alert. That will continue, but there's, like I said, not a special emphasis or anything like that, or targeting PFAS in particular, aside from that work that we're doing in the seafood space. So I just wanted to give you an overall sense. I think maybe I hopefully answered some of your questions there as to kind of where we're focusing our attention with respect to PFAS right now.
Thanks, Mark. It's a good overview. Any questions right now from any committee members? Commissioner Ellison?
On the seafood, are there any geographic brackets on where those hits came from?
To my recollection, Southeast Asia, a lot of it's imported clams. That's my recollection. I mean, we do look at both import and domestic. Again, I think we're focusing on mollusks and that sort of those filter feeders that are tending to pick up a lot of PFAS. But my recollection of the data was that it was a lot of that was coming out of Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia.
Thank you.
Chairman King.
Dr. J.
Hi, Mark. So nice to see you, and you've just changed the alphabet in your government service from FDA. But so one of the challenges, certainly for the 2000s and from 2012 on up, has been with analytical methods for PFAS, and it was I think a real advance when the drinking water program was able to develop their methods, but as it expanded to looking at other matrices, and this has particularly been a question I've had when you look at food, is how do you deal with other things that can interfere with the method itself? And so, I guess I'm curious where FDA, do you feel confident that people are actually measuring what they think they're measuring? And that you are, if you get a detect, you have confidence that there's a detect versus a non-detect. But have the methods evolved enough? Are they, standard methods gone through the ASTM process or others?
Those are great questions, Jennifer. It's good to see you again. I don't run the lab, so I'm not going to be able to answer that question as well as I would need to. What I will say is that as we release the information that's coming, well, first of all, I'll say that we have confidence whenever we get to the point of doing something like we did for the clams and taking a regulatory action or preventing imports. We have scientific confidence that the methods that we're using to underpin that survey work are sound. That being said, I know that we're continuing to do work on method development, and when you see the results come out for the infant formula, I think you'll start to see where we're getting advancing the methodology in terms of the levels of detection and that sort of thing that we're being able to look to. And I know that's been broadly happening across the scientific community. So we were very tied into that. We have a huge lab apparatus in the human foods programs. It's the biggest part of our program. If it's helpful at some point, I'd be happy to kind of engage my lab colleagues to give more kind of robust information on where we are on method development in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Twitty.
Director Hartman, thank you for the presentation. One thing that's been expressed as a concern here is we have rivers, one particular river that there's known PFAS contamination in the river, and the concern for irrigation water and that effect on produce. Is there anything you can say about how FDA has looked at that? Any results looking at that type of aspect of the contamination?
So what I described earlier, that our typical process, kind of looking very broadly across the entire, geographic, across what people are eating in the United States, that's typically the way that we go about doing it. I will say that over the course of time, and I haven't been in FDA that long, but I'm learning some of the lore from others that have been about, situations of particular, like there was a dairy situation in New Mexico near an Air Force facility that had PFAS contamination in the groundwater and ended up contaminating the dairy herd, and then it created problems for the milk. I think that, by its nature, a lot of these contaminants are very geographically specific. If you're in a place where there's a high level of PFAS contamination, more likely to have that sort of situation. I'm not aware that we've done anything specific in North Carolina or elsewhere around a specific river system. I don't know that for a fact, though, and I can always go back and check, but I'm not aware that we've embarked on any survey sort of information on that specific geographic area. I'm not sure when we did the work in milk how that came to our attention, whether it was brought to our attention by the state or we were just catching that in our normal business of surveying what's going on in our regular compliance and enforcement activities. But that's, and in those activities, it's possible, of course, that we might pick up something that would lead us to be concerned about this particular geographical area. But that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
Thank you, Mark. Any other
You're
questions? Any comments? Mark, questions that I sent over, conducted by the current testing conducted by FDA, other commodities or concerns. You've certainly hit on the clams, the imported piece. Domestically, I think you've gone back to specific commodities, the kids' foods. The question on the kids' part, being the youth piece that you spoke of, got a question on that is, how can we help that process in North Carolina through this committee in rulemaking for PFAS to include what you are doing and what your studies are showing to help that particular piece? What can we do to help?
I appreciate the offer. I think I need to make sure I clarify something too, because I mixed two parts of the contaminant work. So Closer to Zero is our program that's focused on the heavy metals, that focuses specifically on kids' food and baby food. So, but action levels are the tool that we use in that program to try to advance those policy objectives of reducing the levels of metals in kids' foods. Action levels could be a tool that we would use to do something similar for PFAS more generally if we chose to. We could focus on kids, but I didn't mean to imply that we were focusing on kids' foods and PFAS in the same way that we're doing for the heavy metals. But that we could use or might consider using that tool of an action level as one way to try to limit the amount of that contaminant in different commodities. And where we're continuing to do active work or have quite a bit of data on is really limited in the sense that we've got that bottled water survey, and we also have multiple years of information on different types of seafood. So that's going to continue to be where we focus our attention. So if we were to choose to do an action level, and I'm trying to predict where we might have the data that could support that scientifically, it would only be in those two areas at this time. That's not to say that as time goes on that we might not identify other commodities that we might want to focus on. And again, when we look to things like TDS and also what our enforcement compliance folks are finding in the field as two data sources to identify particular commodities you might want to do additional work in. Right now, we're not doing additional work beyond what I mentioned in terms of PFAS. Those are the two areas where we felt were most ripe for doing those deeper dives. So I hope that kind of clarifies it. So, I mean, I appreciate that offer. I couldn't say that we have a particular set of commodities that information would be relevant for in the near term, but certainly anything that you would collect, and share with the agency would be more than welcome. We get data sets from a lot of different sources and are very helpful for us trying to figure out where to prioritize our work.
Well, in our groundwater committee and this committee on surface water, we've discussed many times bottled water. That's come up. Commissioner Baumgartner had that comment 7-8 months ago in reference to the bottled water. And so we would certainly be available to help you in any way we can. Any other questions or comments from any committee members?
Before we wrap up, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
King, I want to thank you for coming and spending some time with us today. As you know, North Carolina is no mystery to the PFAS issue, especially with Kim Moore's and as Chairman talked about in the New Hanover area and the Cape Fear River and that basin. And so the citizens of this state are greatly concerned with it. And this committee is challenged with establishing groundwater standards or surface water standards are exactly what our response will be to that. And so having someone that we can go to help answer these questions, to give us what the facts are in an unbiased way and a very transparent way, I think is what we need and actually what the department here needs as well. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your candor with this. And I will say you may hear from us in the future as well as we navigate this. So thank you.
And
You're very, very welcome. Happy to have done it.
Mark, thank you. And I want to introduce you as well to our new executive director, John Evans, who he'll probably be ringing your phone maybe at least once a month. So, John, if you can step in the camera and show what you look like.
Mr. Director, good to see you.
Hi, John. Good to meet you.
He's our.
See you there.
Yeah, look that way.
There we go.
He's new. He's our new executive director, first one we've ever had. So we're excited to have him, and he's going to be carrying a load on this moving forward. And we're just thankful that you will allow us to communicate with you and network with you and the collaboration that we have. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, happy to do it. And if you ever need anything, just let me know.
Thank you. Bye.
Good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
So let me, as Mark signs off and thank him too, as the chair talking, and hopefully we didn't ambush him any today, and he had a good virtual meeting. So thank him for that. We do have a number of topics as we look at this numeric standard and kind of moving our path forward. Let me back up and say first, we've got some information on PFAS or 1,4-dioxin that the council is going to give us tomorrow, a little bit on the permit issues and a lawsuit that's been going on that could inform us on 1,4. So I'll keep that. We'll move through 1,4 that way tomorrow. But I hope to work with Chair Keene. We've got things like treatment technologies and cost. I know that'll have to be updated from the last couple of years. We've got lawsuits at the federal level over MCLs and updates on those. EPA's made some declaratory statements in association with those trials. So those lawsuits, we may want to be briefed on that. For the benefits, we had property value last time as byline food. Property value was next. Private wells, downstream utilities, but food was the biggest one in that benefit. side. So probably need to look at costs, trying to lead to benefits, but I'll try to keep us moving on the big picture to make sure we're moving on a numeric path while we're doing the mitigation, the monitoring and mitigation, which public comment closes on that, opens and closes this summer. We should be having some hearings. So we're going to be doing two things at one time, but we will be moving forward. So I'll stop with that and give it back to Joe.
Commissioner Reardon, thank you.
I
Sure,
do want to add just one piece to what Mark said, because he just came to FDA last year, and we're really glad to have him. Jennifer, I know you worked with him at EPA, so I think we would all consider him a competent source. But in 2018, FDA did come into the state of North Carolina, and I was at the Department of Ag at that time, and they collected 20 samples in the Fayetteville area. And these was a variety of agriculture commodities. Obviously, in that area, you got water, you got deposition, you got a lot of different vehicles in which PFAS can come back and be associated with these commodities. Of those 20 samples that they collected, their characterization was no indication that any of these samples had results levels at levels in which present a human health concern. And so FDA has not been back in that area and did a concentrated sampling plan, but in that case, they did. Subsequent to that, FDA came into the state of North Carolina and collected samples all across some of the roadside stands throughout our state, from Wilmington all the way up, and they presented that at an international forum. In fact, they had to go back and reanalyze it, Jennifer, for what you brought up, because in running these complex matrices, this instrumentation is detecting in the parts per trillion, just the tubes and the columns themselves can be a catalyst for contamination or cross-contamination in the marketplace, depending on how they're stored and such as that. But even of all those samples, FDA said they found no samples of any public health concern. All that data is on the website. It's publicly available. You can find it. Obviously, Mark, not familiar with some of that because it is a little bit archaic in that regard, but it is encouraging to see of all the samples that they collected, and these are cabbage, collard greens, kale, mustard greens, cabbage, a lot of these, tomatoes, blueberries, really a lot of different commodities that may have the ability to do uptake differently one from another. But I find comfort in some of that analytical work showing nothing of public health significance. I'll stop there.
And one thing I could just add, we are fortunate, particularly with the area universities, that there continues to be a lot of work. And there's an investigator in particular at UNC who's been making a lot of headway in this area too. And her name's Erin Baker. She may be someone that we want to keep tabs of as well. Ilona has interacted with her, and so just a future reference down the road. And then there's been people at NC State and EPA in particular have done a lot in the water arena. So it'll just help expand, what information we have, where we have uncertainties, and, where we can have some confidence.
Thank you. Chairman.
We're going to wrap this up now with committee. Any others?
Commissioner Reardon, do we know anything yet of certain plants tend to have higher rates of uptake of certain contaminants? Leafy green vegetables or tomatoes or whatever. Is there any data yet to discern if the PFAS are certain plants are more susceptible?
Boy, that's a great question. How many days do we want to be here? I will tell you, and I've done a lot of extensive reading and peer review evaluation of articles that's been written. Based on what I've seen, and some of this it's a little bit dated, so the methodology's changed, the ability to detect has changed, so it's a very dynamic space. But early in some of this, it appears that products like broccoli, which has florets on it, have the ability to concentrate a little bit easier. Corn, for some reason, has the ability to show some concentration. Peppers. But depending on the composition and the cell structure of that plant and how long that plant from planting to maturity is having a big effect. But I will say those that have florets and such as that seem to have shown in multiple peer review articles as a greater ability to do concentration in those florets. That's not true with all leafy greens or potatoes or tomatoes and such as that, or fruit. But they are a couple of commodities. And again, broccoli, cauliflower is one of those that they've shown a little higher propensity to concentrate in.
Thank you.
Remind them of the daffodil, would you drop a little red dye in there and watch it come up?
Yeah,
It's the old biology and science. Any questions, comments from committee members? Director's report? Director Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the informative session today. I'll save my comments for tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Director Rogers and I did discuss the agenda and thinking about the models that we have looked at, the Jordan, the Falls, and Hall River. Those are still on the radar, particularly the Falls Lake and the Jordan. So they are something that we've not put in a drawer. And the stormwater pieces, sort of following along with the dam piece and looking at the RIAs. Going to be interesting to see what those RIAs look like. I don't think that would come through this committee, but it's something that we need to look at probably in the future. So anything else? With that, we adjourn. Thank you.
Fastest meeting we've ever had.
See you, man.
I wish I could have just sat down with the envelope.